Today's episode is for anyone who has ever said, I want to start something, but I don't know where to begin. Because we're sitting down with someone who didn't wait for the perfect time. She started building her dream alongside a full-time job. Today, we're joined by Keri, the founder of Local Studios. Keri opened her studio alongside working a 9 to 5 and still works that 9 to 5 on top of owning the studio and teaching classes there. And we're getting the full behind the scenes of what it actually takes to do this. From how she knew she was ready to take the leap, to the timeline of opening her Lagree studio, the finances, and the reality of building a business from the ground up, we're covering it all. If you've been thinking about starting something of your own, this episode will give you both the clarity and the push you need to get started. Thanks for coming today, Keri. We're really excited to have you.
We're so excited.
Yay. Thank you guys. I'm so excited to be here.
I know we give a little bit of an intro on you, but can you give us an intro in your own words of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Keri. I'm 26 years old. I'm a Lagree Fitness master trainer and the owner of Local Lagree Fitness Studio in Saint Petersburg. Outside of the Lagree world, I am a biotech consultant. My background is in biomedical engineering. So that's my full-time job, 9 to 5 by day, and then Lagree studio owner and trainer in the morning too, and by night.
What the heck? Okay, first of all, I didn't know until right the second that you're only 26. You've
Right.
done all of this and you're only 26 years old, which is crazy.
So
and
impressive.
then you fully have like a whole job and a whole business, and you also teach classes there. That's crazy.
Yeah, that is a lot. That I didn't realize you were doing, you said biomedical consulting?
Yes. So my
Wow.
degree is in biomedical engineering, and then the niche of management consulting I'm in is in biotech. So think pharmaceuticals, med device, anything kind of in that sphere.
Oh my goodness. Okay. We're going to get all into like how you balance all of the things and all of that. But can you give us a little background for people who don't know what Lagree is? Because Lagree is different than Pilates, but kind of similar. But can you clarify like what is Lagree?
Yeah, absolutely. So Lagree is a method. The workout itself is going to be high intensity and low impact, and it takes place on this machine called the Megaformer. So Grace, just like you said, it's similar to a reformer in the way that it uses spring-based tension, but our goals with Lagree are very different than Pilates, which makes the workouts really unique to one another. Lagree is going to be muscular endurance, muscular strength, and core, where we're ultimately working towards muscular fatigue. Whereas Pilates, I think of it more rehabilitative. It's still going to help you build a strong core, good postural alignment and breath work and mind-body connection. But Lagree is really just more intense at the end of the day. And our goals are different in the fact that we're building strength and endurance versus longevity, mobility, alignment, posture.
Is Lagree similar to solid core, or are they different?
So they are different.
Okay.
In order to be officially Lagree, you have to be teaching the Lagree method on Lagree equipment at a Lagree licensed studio. So if you don't check those boxes, it's not like tried and true Lagree. That being said, solid core is not considered Lagree. There was a point in which it was. It actually started as Lagree, a piece of lore and a fun fact, but it is not any longer.
Oh, interesting. But are the workouts similar? Because I go to solid core sometimes, and I guess when I do Pilates, it probably would be considered Lagree. I have no idea. But like, are the workouts similar?
Yeah.
Okay.
Solid core is still similar to Lagree. I think over time they've differentiated more and more, where I've taken a couple solid core classes as well. I'm like, definitely like Lagree. I love it. It's my
Okay.
favorite. But you gotta like try it out. And I had really positive experiences, but the difference that like I felt personally is Lagree is a lot slower. It really emphasizes that time under tension, slow controlled movement. Whereas I felt like solid core was a lot more motivational, like push it, like get to that point of muscular fatigue, where Lagree really locks into that low impact element of this is going to be safe for your joints. This is going to be like rehabilitative in the way that it's not doing burst movements. It's not doing things that could put stress on the body. Not saying that solid core does, but I think the pace is different.
Oh, I feel like it puts so much stress on the body.
I know, yeah. I haven't been in a while, so I'm like, I can't speak to it, but I can speak to the fact that Lagree is definitely safe, low impact, good for a lot of different populations because of that fact.
Yeah, I'm a Lagree girl. I love Lagree, and that's one of the reasons why I love it, because it is more time under tension, and I feel like I build a lot of strength, which is why I was so excited to see your video on TikTok. So for anyone listening, I saw a video that you did on TikTok where you were talking about opening a Lagree studio alongside having a 9 to 5. And I was like, this is insanely impressive, because I can't even imagine like managing the two things and just being young and opening a studio and also opening any sort of fitness studio is such a dream for so many people. And so I immediately sent the video over to Erin. I was like, we need to have her on the podcast when we're filming in person because I just think it's so impressive. But kind of with that, can you take us back to the beginning? Like, what made you want to open a Lagree studio at all? And like, when did this idea come into your head?
Yeah, I think it all kind of comes back to like loving Lagree. That's where a lot of this like spurred from. Before I found Lagree, I was like post grad, fresh out of school for biomedical engineering. And I like enjoy my full time job. I'm really grateful for it and appreciative of the fact that it's allowed me to get to where I am today. But when I graduated and I checked all those boxes that I had in my head for the first 22 years of my life, get an education, get a degree, get a job. And once I had those things, I was kind of like, okay, what now? Whereas I was satisfied and like happy with my job, but I kept thinking, is there something more? Is there something extra that I should be doing? I just didn't feel fulfilled in my day to day. So had a little bit of like a quarter life crisis at age 22.
Relatable.
Yeah. I was like, what the heck am I like here for? What am I supposed to do with the rest of my life? So I started like spam hobbying.
Hobby maxing, that's what they call it now.
I started hobby maxing. Like I started crocheting, I started reading, I started running, I started yoga. I'm like, I'm gonna find something that I like to spend my time doing is kind of what I was looking for. And it was at that point that I stumbled upon Lagree, and where those other things didn't really click for me, Lagree from like the first time I did it absolutely did, where I really hadn't up until that point found a way that I loved moving my body. Like movement and exercise was something that I knew I needed to do, but not something I always wanted to do. But when I found Lagree, that just completely changed. And I was like, this is it. This is what I want to really lock into. So I did as a client and a student first. I was in those classes every day of the week. If they let me take 2 of them, I probably would have. But once a day at least, I was doing it just because I loved it. And I loved the community of the studio I was at. And my full-time job at that point was remote for the most part. So there was days where I would be in my apartment. I wouldn't like speak the whole day because I was just online and I didn't have that interaction. So Lagree gave me a workout that I really loved, and it gave me a space that I wanted to be in. So once I started as a client, like the progression to become an instructor was kind of just a natural fit. And when the opportunity presented itself, I chose it. And then it kind of just progressed from there. The more and more I could do with it, the more I wanted to. And making a living as a full-time fitness instructor is possible, but it's really tough. So I never thought of like leaving or pivoting from my full-time job at that point. But if I wanted to go further with it, I thought, what's the next natural step? Which is where I started thinking about maybe I could do this as a studio owner and run my own place.
Okay, I have so many questions. First of all, you said you didn't even discover Lagree until you were like, what, 22 or 23, and now you're only 26, and you went from like student, instructor, studio owner in like such a short period of time. I feel like a lot of people listening to this, if they're interested in Pilates and Lagree, and maybe they have the same like passion for it as you do, but they like maybe feel like they wouldn't be qualified to take that leap from like student to instructor to owner. Like, what did that look like? How long were you an instructor before you started thinking like, oh, I want to like own my whole studio? Or how long were you a student before you became an instructor? What did that timeline look like?
Yeah, that is a great question. With student to instructor, I guess I'll cover that first. I don't think I like necessarily like made a decision in my head to become an instructor until the opportunity presented itself. The studio that I was a member of was in a real need for instructors about, I'm going to say like 8 months after I started going there. Not for any like negative reason. Like people were moving, people were pregnant. Like there was like a real like jam that the owner was in. Like I need instructors immediately. And once I saw that is kind of when I was like, okay, maybe I could do that. Maybe that would be like the next step for me. So I emailed her. I was like, hi, like I love this. I'd love to like be a part of it and take it a step further. My background being in biomedical engineering, with my degree, I did a lot with biomechanics. So I have like a strong movement foundation from that respect as well. So I emailed her. I was like, what do I need to do? Like, what does that next step look like? And at the time, there wasn't any local certification for it. So I would have to go to California to go and get it at Lagree headquarters with Sebastian Lagree, who is the creator of the method. And it just seemed like an opportunity I couldn't really say no to. I was like, if I say no to this, like, I don't know, I would keep thinking about it. I think I would regret it. So I, again, kind of like impromptu made that decision from the point in which I decided I was going to start instructing and get certified. I was on the plane to California probably about 3 weeks later, like less than
Wow.
a month later. I got the certification. I came back, and again, just because there was such a need at the studio for instructors, I started practicing like every second, every hour that I could, just the cueing, going through my sequence and the class routine, preparing for the audition. And I passed it, and I was on the schedule next week, which is really a fast turnaround time. Like with my girls that I train at the studio, we definitely spend a lot of time before we get to the point in which we're on the mic. But I understand the position she was in as well. But from there, with instructing, I just fell in love with it. I was really searching for something that like brought me peace and alignment, and it just did. And not to say that it wasn't challenging and it didn't like make me think and I didn't have to work hard at it, because I definitely did. It was a curve, and with anything new, you have to give yourself grace, but I just felt like when I was doing that, I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. So naturally, just like the hobbies, I instructor maxed. I was trying to do as many classes as I absolutely could. I was trying to take as many classes as I could, because as an instructor, the best thing you can do for yourself is to continue to be a student. So I did that as much as possible. I guess too, just to come like back to the center, back to the point of when did I make the choice to become studio owner from an instructor? That definitely took a little bit more time, and it wasn't like a instant decision the way that, oh, look, there's an opportunity to be an instructor, like I'm going to do that. It wasn't like there's an opportunity to be a studio owner, I'm going to do that. I kind of had to pave my way with it, and certain things had to fall into place in my life to lead me to that decision. But the first, I think, turning point for me where I started thinking maybe this is possible is there was another girl in Nashville, same age as me at the time, who opened a studio.
Wait, is it Kenzie West? Oh my gosh, I love her.
She like for me is like such a role model of mine. Like she paved the way, and getting to watch her and see her open her True Form like Nashville downtown location, I was like, wow.
And she has like 4 studios now. Yeah.
She's like completely like soared and taken off from there. But watching her do that really just like opened my eyes to, okay, maybe this is a possibility, which is when those gears started turning. But I don't think at that point I like made the decision necessarily. I was like, I'm going to open a studio. It was like, okay, maybe I could.
At what point did it go from maybe I could to I'm going to do this thing? Or was it more of a slow kind of lead up to where it was like, maybe I could, let me do a little research. Okay, wait, maybe like how did that progress?
Yeah, it definitely was a slow lead up. I was teaching in Nashville as much as I could and actively starting to think about if I had a studio, what would it look like? What would it sound like? How would it be different than what I'm used to? How would it be similar? So I started asking myself these questions, but I knew deep down that the place that I hypothetically would open the studio would not be Nashville. I love Nashville, and it has a very special place in my heart, but I knew that I didn't see myself there long term. And when you open a business, I've never had a baby, but I think it's
Yeah,
I'm sure.
Yeah, you need to be present, and you are kind of like stuck in that place, at least for a couple of years to get it up and running. So it wasn't until like life just outside of Lagree brought me to Florida that I was like, okay, now I'm in a place that I love. I feel in alignment with Lagree. I feel in alignment in Florida. If there's a place, I think this is the one, which is where I started really getting more serious about it. Again, not having made a decision at that point, but starting to do a little bit more preparation and planning. like I put together a business plan. I was like, okay, all these thoughts are swirling in my head. Let me try to put it down on paper and let me try to understand the things that I would need to know to make an educated decision of if this is possible for me. Um, Even at that point, it still was just like a Word doc on my computer. It was August of 2024 where I think I had my moment of, okay, you're going to at least try this. I was 24 at the time, and I had a cousin who's my age. He's also 24. We're a couple weeks apart. He had a really horrific and like tragic accident that took his life,
Oh my
unfortunately.
gosh.
And for me, like, I was just so like shocked and devastated because when you're this age, you think like I have all the time in the world. Like I have my whole life in front of me. There's no rush to do things. And there isn't a rush. Not to say there is, but when that happened, it just put in perspective for me of like, if tomorrow was my last day, like, would I feel fulfilled? Would I feel like I did everything that I came here to do? Was it time well spent? And I think in a lot of ways it was, but sometimes you go through the motions. Sometimes like the days just pass by and I'm like, what did I do? Like, what did I get out of that? So after that happened, it really put a lot in perspective for me. And I was like, okay, like there's no time like the present. I might as well give this a shot. And that's when I started saying, like, okay, what do I need to do? At least I'm going to try to figure out if I can do this. And if I fail, that's okay. At least I tried.
Wow. First of all, I'm so sorry that happened. That's crazy. And yeah, I feel like that's such like a profound way to think about it. Like, am I doing everything that I could to like live my dream life or like go after what I want? What did the like market research look like? Like when you were putting together that initial Word doc and starting to draft your business plan, I'm sure you did some level of like looking at what the market environment looked like in St. Petersburg, like what Lagree studios were out there, what's the need for it, are there enough studios for the demand? What did that look like?
Yeah, that was an evolving process too. It was kind of like funny and interesting. So when I moved here and I started looking at St. Petersburg, there was very few options, which is so funny now because you go down Central Avenue and you have your pick of like what
Mhm.
studio do you want to go to today. And I love that. And like I love that the fitness scene is so vibrant there. But when I first moved here, it wasn't like that. So when I did my like market research, market analysis, I kind of eliminated Tampa. There was a studio that I was working for at the time that I loved, and I loved the girls, and I have a lot of respect for the owners. So for me, it wasn't going to be in Tampa. I just thought like the boxes were checked in Tampa. There wasn't going to like be a need or a place for what I was going to be opening up. So I looked at St. Petersburg, and I think a lot of people were looking at the same time as me, unbeknownst to me. Some like big players too, like Solidcore. When I looked at St. Petersburg, Solidcore wasn't there yet. Body Rock wasn't there yet. A couple other places weren't open. So I think they came to the same conclusion that I did at the same time, which I'll give myself like a little pat on the
Yeah,
back. I'm
right?
like, little old me. Yeah.
yeah.
Like identified a market that like these people with a lot of resources also identified. So my initial market research looked a little bit different as I like went through the motions and these places started opening up. It evolved over time. But I did look at comparable studios. I looked at ones I really admired, just like all over the map of like what's their model, like their membership based, what does the pricing look like? How many members would I need at that price to make this profitable if I budget X, Y, and Z for rent and utilities and all of these factors? So I started looking at market research from that perspective. And as those studios started to open, it kind of just layered on to my research of like, okay, here's what the people in the area are pricing for their services. Here's what's available. Here's what is similar to me. Here's what's different. How do I make sure we're different enough that there's a space here?
What are some of the things that when you were opening, you were like, knowing that you want it to be different than other things that you had experienced before? What were some of the things that you were like, I want my Lagree studio to do like this or this, and that's how we're going to stand out?
Yeah, I am big on community. Like for me, you can go and you can get a workout at 20 different places in a 10-mile radius. So I did have to think like, what is going to make our studio different? And it's really just like the community aspect. I didn't want things to feel cold. I didn't want it to feel transactional. I didn't want you to come to your 20th class and the instructor not know your name and not know that you had a torn ACL and you're going to modify moves because your knee's bothering you. Like, I wanted to make sure I created an environment that people felt welcome. They didn't feel like they were just getting a workout. They felt like they were getting an experience and that it was personable and it could meet them where they are. Because I think too, things can sometimes be a little one size fits all, and we have a smaller studio. And part of that was like with the intention of, I want to make this a place where people feel like they can show up and have somewhere to start and we can get stronger from there. But I want this to be approachable. I want it to be warm. I want it to have that community feel, and I want people to feel welcome.
I'm such a numbers girl. Obviously, we talk like so much about money and stuff on the podcast. When you were doing that initial business plan and like looking at the market research and membership models and all of that, did the numbers scare you, or were you like, wait, this is actually so doable?
No, I was scared. Okay, maybe not scared. I did like take deep breath and be like, okay, like, how am I gonna do this? Like, 'cause it's easy to say, like, once I made that decision, like, I'm gonna do this.
Yeah.
But then it's like, I'm gonna do this.
Yeah.
And like the tone changes a little bit. I did have to get creative because I knew from like the circumstances and the resources that I had, I wasn't gonna be able to come at this from the same angle as somebody who had like backers or investors or somebody who is coming from like a franchise or private equity. I'm like, they're going to open a studio in a way that's a lot different than how I have to do this. So I started looking too at like what variables I could work with, like what was within my control, what was not within my control. Like with Lagree, I am very like tied to Lagree as a method, Lagree as a brand. I'm a master trainer. For me, it was a non-negotiable that it was going to be a Lagree studio. And again, I love it. I wouldn't want to see it for any other reason, wouldn't want to do anything else. But the equipment cost, that for me was going to be a non-negotiable. And that was a huge startup expense that I kind of had to think about and rationalize. Rent was variable. I was like, okay, this is something that is not fixed that I can maybe kind of see a scale of options for. Same with build out. How much money am I going to put into the space? Variable. And then again, some of the things that were going to be fixed month to month, like utilities and software, marketing, variable. So kind of just identifying like what in this situation can I control and what can I not control.
How did you go about making sure your numbers were like accurate estimates? Were you talking to other studio owners, or like how did you go about getting comps? Because there, like you just said, there's so many things that can throw off your budget between like the startup costs of the renovations, but then also your monthly. Like, how did you know how much you were going to end up spending on like instructors?
Yeah, I think my experience in like the space guided a lot. Like I knew what my contract looked like. I knew what I was being paid. At that point, I had worked at studios in 2 different cities. I had worked across 3 different studios. I had a good idea of like what those values looked like. I did bring on help. Like I will always ask for help when I need it. Like one thing that I'm proud of, like not ashamed of, I brought on a consultant who works with Lagree Studios and Pilates Studios. And I did that from not day 1, but like day 2 when I was like, okay, I made this business plan. How do I start filling in these blanks? She was so helpful. So helpful. Her name's Hensley with Reboot. So if anybody watching needs somewhere to start, talk to
I think that's
Hensley.
such a good tip.
Yeah, she really like laid the blueprint of like, these are the things that you need to be looking at. She couldn't answer the question for me of like, what's my budget? How much do I spend on rent? How much do I spend on build out? Again, those were things that I was going to have to kind of figure out. But as far as like membership model and like what she's seen in the past and what I could use as benchmarks, very, very helpful for somebody to give me that information. Just because too, with Lagree, it's a licensing model, which is a little bit different than a franchise. Whereas with a franchise, you kind of are given like a blueprint. And I don't want to speak like too much about it because I don't have a franchise, so I don't know. But from what I've heard is you're given a lot of resources. You're given projections. You're given the branding. You do this on Monday. You do this on Tuesday. with Lagree, it's very open in the way you approach it and how you run things. So there was a lot of blanks for me to fill in versus if I went a different route.
Right. Because with a franchise, even thinking about like a fast food franchise, right? Every McDonald's is supposed to give you the same experience. Every Chick-fil-A is supposed to be the same. So when you open a franchise, it's like, here's how things are done. We'll help you figure out how
Yeah,
to
you just have
do
to
it. You just,
execute.
yeah, like you just have to execute and we'll support you on how to do it versus creating your own thing from scratch. There is no plan for, okay, you do it this exact way. You have to figure that out. You have to figure out how exactly do we want to do all of these things and then how do we also execute. But the tip about hiring a consultant is so smart. Like I didn't know that was even a thing at all.
I think it's because I'm a consultant.
Yeah.
Like in like biotech, I'm in the consultant world, and when people need help and they need to do things that are kind of outside like the sphere or scope of what they have available to them with their current team, they hire a consultant. And I do draw a lot of like knowledge and experience from my time in corporate America too. I think that's definitely helped me in a lot of different ways. But yeah, that's why I thought of it. It's like, well, I'm a consultant.
Yeah.
Why don't I just hire somebody like me?
I
and
love
do
that.
this?
So you said you started thinking about this in August of 2024. What was the timeline between like idea to like doors open?
Yeah, 16 months
Wow,
is
okay.
the
Wow.
like number, the time. I do think that time can be very variable depending on like the person, depending on your area. With my specific situation, it took me a while to find a lease that was the
Mm.
right fit. Because again, I knew how much I could afford in rent, roughly based on what I thought my prices were going to be. I also knew how much I was able to put forward to a build out. So finding a location, and I didn't want to like compromise on like having it be somewhere that I didn't think was like complimentary to the brand or somewhere that's like accessible for people walking or for people coming home from work. So I was very particular and I didn't want to just open to open. I wanted to open because I found a space that fit my needs financially, but also felt right for what I was trying to achieve with the brand. And to find that space, it took me close to a year.
Oh wow,
Wow.
okay. Okay, so the actual like renovation time wasn't that long then.
Yeah, we purely did cosmetic changes because, again, with the build out, I had a certain budget and it didn't lend itself to doing anything extensive. So I knew what I wanted it to look like. And I knew when I found the space that I could get it there with the amount that I had. And any space that was like a lot of money for the build out was just unfortunately X'd off the list. And yeah.
That makes a lot of sense though, because I think when people talk about buying a house, they talk about the location a lot and how the location is something that you can't really change very quickly, right? Like if down the line you said, "Oh, I want to add something to the studio," you could add something in if there's, budget for it at that time, but you can't just like pick up and move your business down the street 6 months later because the location is no longer ideal. And I think that makes sense with, you said like with foot traffic and where people are walking and where there's good parking and things like that. You will get a lot of people who just walk by and are like, "Ooh, what is that?" Versus if you're kind of out in the middle of nowhere or in an area where no one really frequents, then the way that you market the business, I feel like has to be totally different. So that's a really good, like a good call out. When it comes to you've mentioned like the cost of the build out and all of those things. You obviously don't have to give us like your exact numbers, but I think it would be helpful to understand what that looks like in terms of not just for you, but from like what you learned in your research before. How do people go about funding something like this?
Yeah, there is no one way to do it. Everybody that I've talked to has done it a different way. So no like one's experience is going to be the same. For me, it was very much like a puzzle of a bunch of different things. I did have a decent amount in savings. I always joke that like before I decided on the Lagree Studio, I thought I was gonna buy like a Ford Bronco. So I thought I was gonna buy a Bronco, but then like I came to this decision and I had all this like money for it saved up, and I'm like, well, I'm gonna buy Megaformers instead.
Wait, that's so funny because I swear everyone in Nashville drives a Bronco. Is that like a
so
thing?
cute. Yeah, it's not like an original thought or idea. I just was like, wow. Like I drive around, and I love my little car. Like I call her Gertie. It's a 2011 Honda Accord. And like I have no qualms with my car. I love her. But I was like, wow, it'd just be so cool to drive a Bronco. And I had money saved for that. Like with my time in Nashville, I was lucky that like when I was going there, it's definitely boomed more since I left, but like the cost of living allowed me to put a decent amount in my savings. I really wasn't doing anything like too ambitious with my dollars. I wasn't traveling. It really was just kind of like putting it somewhere. I thought it was for a Bronco. It turned out to be for Megaformers. But I had a decent amount of savings. I also had some money from a private loan. I also ended up putting some of it on credit cards. So had to borrow some money, had some money of my own. The budget, I was like pretty strict with it though, because I knew that there was a ceiling. There's only so much I had in savings. There's only so much I had in a loan. There's only so much I had in credit cards. So I had to make every decision with a lot of intent and strictness.
How did you get comfortable taking that risk? And I'm going to follow that question with like, did you, in your market research, did you figure out a sweet spot for profitability? Like, were you talking to other studio owners being like, oh, well, it's typical that you'll become profitable in 12 months. So like financing it is fine because you're going to make your money back in like X amount of time. Like, was that part of your decision-making process or just how did you get comfortable taking the risk?
Yeah, I think any risk is inherently uncomfortable. You kind of just have to decide if it's worth it. And for me, it was. I always say to myself, like, well, Keri, there isn't a problem that you haven't solved yet. There isn't something that you haven't figured out. So with the risk, I kind of just had to trust myself of like, you've made it this far. And if this doesn't work, like the world will keep spinning. You'll keep going. You'll figure out something else. So definitely had to have like a little bit of like delusional belief in like my ability that if this isn't okay, if it doesn't work, like I will be, like I will figure it out. Um, but I did again get a lot of my knowledge from the consultant. I didn't ask other like business owners in particular. I know like money and numbers are like a funny thing, so I didn't want to put anybody in a position and ask for that data, but I did have like enough analysis myself of like I know that I need to hit this amount of memberships in order to break even with the rent and my costs. So I had that number in my head. Was it just like a hope of like, okay, hopefully I can like get to this number, and if I can't, then again, I'll be okay. Like I'm going to pivot and I'll figure it out. But yeah, there was no guarantee of like if I do this, then I know I'm going to open profitably. It's like if I do this and I follow my gut and I listen to the people around me and I ask for help when I need it, then I hope I'm doing everything that I need to do, but there's still a chance that I won't.
This is like, it's such a refreshing perspective to hear because I think a lot of the women who listen to this podcast are very similar to all of us in the sense that they want to take a risk and do something like this, but there's those fears that are there. But like you said, you're like, there isn't a problem that I haven't solved. That's the case for all of us here and for almost everyone listening to the podcast. When we really look at our track record, it's like, I do figure it out. When something goes awry, I pivot, I solve. But we often get so fixated on the fear. So it's really refreshing to hear you just say, like, I just had to go for it and really just practice some like radical self-trust and lean into that. With the topic of the numbers and stuff, are there any numbers that or ranges that you're able to share in terms of like leases range in price? You know, I saw everything from this to this, or in terms of buying equipment, it can range from this to this. Are there any numbers that you're able to share?
Yeah, with the leases, it's a little tricky because it really depends on your market. Like my experience in Saint Petersburg is going to be very different if you're in like Montana, if you're in California, like those values are going to look different. For me personally, I saw anywhere from tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands.
A month?
No.
Oh, I was
For
like,
the year. Well, actually, I'm like tens of thousands for the month. Yes.
okay.
But yeah, like hundreds of thousands for the year. Yes.
Whoa.
It really ranges, I think, to being in Florida. And being in Saint Petersburg and Tampa, like those are like booming cities right now. A lot of people are moving here. A lot of people want to be here, open businesses here, especially in St. Petersburg. I knew I wanted to be downtown, and the closer you get to that pier, the more expensive your rent is. So hopefully that range provides some clarity. But again, it just really depends on where you are. Um, as far as like other values, I think if you're thinking about opening a studio, it really depends on what studio you're going to open. If you open a mat studio, your startup costs as far as equipment go are going to be close to nothing. You can get some really nice mats for not that much money. Props as well aren't too bad. With Megaformers and with Lagree, I knew that I was going to be buying like essentially the most expensive piece of equipment on the market. So I did know like my fixed cost for those machines, and it was going to be about 10 grand a piece for the machines. You can finance them, which I did. So I put a percentage of that machine down and I'll pay the rest over time, which is a wonderful option if you are looking at licensing with Lagree. But yeah, startup costs, I think depending on what you want to do, depending on what method, depending on what location, are just very variable.
Wow. As someone who, like, I've done Lagree so many times, never in my life did I think that that machine is
Oh,
$10,000.
really? I would have
Oh
expected
my
that. Like,
gosh.
there's
I
a lot
mean,
that goes into them.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, there is a lot that goes into it, and it's obviously I mean, I'm such a fan of the workout and I love it, but oh my goodness. Like now I'm like, wow. When
I
I
appreciate my class.
my springs, I'm gonna be a lot more gentle and like,
Oh my gosh.
when I ride my carriage to the front, I'm gonna take it nice and slow. Like I it's one of those things though that I think it really intimidates people because they don't know what those figures are, and I think it's helpful. How did you, when you were researching, how did you find those numbers in terms of like how much the equipment costs, or how did you find, because I assume you wouldn't just like go to a place and then they tell you what the cost of the lease is. Like, are there sites and stuff that show it, or like how'd you find those numbers?
Yeah, for the equipment, the costs are rarely available on the Lagree website. So if you are interested in Lagree, they'll give you like the amount for the equipment if you're a licensee versus if you're just like a private person who wants to put a megaformer in their home, which is so cool. I wish I could do that. With the leases, some of it is publicly available. In my experience, just because St. Petersburg and Tampa are such a hot market, sometimes spaces wouldn't even go on the market before they were already taken. They would be off market listings, like they didn't even get there yet, and people were already looking at them. So, for that reason, if you're looking, even if you're not looking to open a fitness studio, if you're looking to open a salon or another business, work with a broker. That was something that I tried to take on myself, was touring these spaces and finding a lease. It was a game changer to bring on help for that because the broker has connections. She has visibility to things that are off market, that are coming on the market soon. So that definitely helped a lot as well.
So let's transition since we're coming up to closer to the end of the episode. Let's transition to like your day to day now because you still work your 9 to 5, which is crazy. So, like, what does your day look like with your job and now as a studio owner?
Yeah, it's long. It's a long day. It's definitely been evolving and getting a little bit less long, which is good. When I first opened the studio, I only had two other instructors beyond myself. So most days it looked like I was waking up at 5 or 6 a.m., teaching morning classes. I would then shut my studio brain off, open my corporate laptop, work 9 to 5, close the laptop at 5, be back at the studio, whether I was teaching or whether I was just being present at the front desk, making sure everything goes smoothly. I am very grateful that we're now up to a team of 6. So my like teaching load at the studio has gone down significantly, which again, I love teaching. So not that it ever felt like burdensome or anything like that. I love it. But it is nice that now that I have a team, I'm able to allocate some of that teaching and responsibility. But the day-to-day still looks similar. I wake up, I make sure everything's going okay with the studio in the morning. I will work my 9 to 5 diligently from 9 to 5. Sometimes if I don't get everything done that I need to, then it'll spill over into the evening too. I'll try to shut the laptop at 5 to, again, step into studio stuff. But if I need to come back to my work after hours. Sometimes I have to. So it's definitely a lot of work and it's definitely a grind, but I think about myself like a year ago or 2 years ago, and I would be like absolutely like clawing at this opportunity. And if like you told me then, like, hey, you can do this, but that's what your day is going to look like, I wouldn't even blink. I'd be like, yeah, sign me up. And I still feel that way now. I'm like, it hasn't changed. Like, I am so grateful to be here and doing this that those days for me, I'm okay. I'm like, this is fine. Sometimes they're hard. Sometimes things are long and sometimes I need a second, but I'm like, this is my dream. And I remind myself that like, this is what I prayed for. And that's what gets me through.
I feel like a lot of people, we talk about this on the podcast often, that whenever you decide to do something like this, you're committing to a period of imbalance where it is just going to be more work and that like it is what it is. And I think sometimes people want to hear a different answer. They want to hear that, no, like, it actually isn't that bad. And I just like balance it well. And I don't have really long days and I was able to outsource from the jump. But the reality is that's often what happens, especially if you're going to take the path of having a 9 to 5 and opening something on the side, which I think is really common. And I'm curious too what your thought process was on now knowing too what your day-to-day looks like and how long those days can be. What was your thought process when it came to I'm going to keep my corporate job alongside, opening this business at the same time and commit to balancing both rather than, because it mitigates a little bit of the risk.
Yeah, I think it came down to stability. I poured my savings, I poured absolutely everything into getting the business off the ground. So I really wasn't in a position to like pivot from my full-time job. And again, I'm grateful for the fact that I like what I do. I like the people I work with. And it wasn't me trying to open a door to rush out of another. It was very much like, I love this part of my life. I want to take this leap and go a step further, but it doesn't mean that I need to completely give up also what I'm doing at that point as well. So I think stability comes down to it. I didn't want to put financial stress or pressure on the business from the jump because in cultivating a space that feels warm and welcoming and non-transactional, I'll always say for me, like, it's not about the money. It's about the premise. Like, it's about the feeling. And somebody could look at me and be like, you're so silly. Like, you run a business and you say it's not about the money. I'm like, well, it's about more than that. And for me, I'd rather like preserve the experience. I'd rather keep letting anything that the business makes pour back into it, like do special things for our members. Like you'll see at our studio, like I love a holiday. Every single like holiday that we've had thus far, like we've had a small business come in, they've gotten little gifts on their megaformers. Like every time I'm like, I would rather have like the money go towards the business and not have to worry about supporting myself. So that's kind of what it came down to, is keeping that stability in my personal life, that I don't let financial stress on me or financial pressure impact our operations, and allow me to keep building, to keep adding, because there's so much more I want to do.
I love that. Okay, let's get into some rapid fire Q&As. This first one, if anything, what surprised you about getting clients to your studio?
Yeah, somebody asked me the other day, like a similar question of what has like pleasantly surprised you most. So I'll answer like that question the
Okay.
same. It's the fact that our members and the girls and the people we have in the studio are just so wonderful. Like I just feel so grateful that the culture that we've built there is so welcoming and kind. Like we'll have members that recognize the fact that there's a new face in class and introduce themselves and ask where they're from and just do these things like so sweet and organic. And it's not me being like, hey, can you introduce yourself to so-and-so? I think you'd hit it off, which I do sometimes if I'm like, I think these two would be like a good pair to connect. But they just do that because they're warm and welcoming and kind people. And it just speaks to the fact that like what we're trying to foster there is working, that these are the people that we have in our doors. So that has surprised me. Not that I didn't like think that that would be the case, but seeing that come to fruition is just, I could cry. It makes me so like happy and so grateful.
Wait, I love that. That's so cute. Okay. The next rapid fire Q&A question is, how did you get comfortable with the uncertainty?
I don't think you ever do. is maybe how like I approach it. I think when you take a risk and when you take a leap, you don't do so and decide that, okay, I'm comfortable doing it. You decide maybe this makes me a little bit uncomfortable, but there's a reason why I'm going to do it anyway. So, kind of looking at that reason of, I like, I love this. I feel in alignment with this method. I have this vision of what I want to build. This is what I love and what I see myself doing is I kind of pivot away from the uncertainty and think about what is certain to me and the things that I can control. And again, like let go and let God. I'm like, some things are in my hands, some things are out of my hands, and worrying about what's uncertain won't help me, but like setting my mind to do what I want to do will.
I love that. Okay, let's do one more before we wrap up. What would you say to someone who feels like they don't have the time or the energy to start something?
You make the time and the energy. I think if you want it enough, you'll find it. You'll find it within yourself. I'm like, there are some times where I'm like, wow, how am I gonna like get to 5 o'clock today? Like, how am I gonna do this? But when you're doing what when you're doing what you feel in alignment with, like right now, I'm very grateful for the fact that like doing this, I feel like I am where I'm supposed to be. This is what I'm supposed to do. The energy and the time make themselves because I would not want to be doing anything else. I wouldn't want to be spending my energy at this point in my life on anything else. So if it's meant to be, it will. You'll find it within yourself and it'll be kind of innate. Like I again, like very often I'm like, I don't think like what if I don't feel up for it? What if I don't have the time? Like I'm like, I'll find the time, I'll find the energy. And it's kind of how you have to think about it.
That's such a good outlook. Okay, I have loved this episode so much. This has been so good. To wrap up, can you tell everyone where to find you and where to find your studio?
Yeah, absolutely. So our studio is local, Lagree Fitness Studio in downtown St. Petersburg. So if you're in St. Pete, if you're in Tampa, we'd love to see you. You can find me on Instagram at Lagree with Keri and on TikTok, Keri.local.
Yay! We'll put all of those links in the show notes of this episode as well so that people can find you and come to all of your classes. I wish I was in St. Pete more so that I could take your classes. But thank you so much, Keri, for coming onto the podcast. And if you're listening to this, thanks for tuning in. And until next week.